point is being captured.
Hello, this is Marxist, and this is 10 Ubers and how they were used. Episode 2, we'll be talking about medics. I'll be using footage from ESCA Invite Medics. Not any real rhyme or reason or system as to how I select these. Just going to be watching some STVs and picking out, moments that I think are really teachable moments for aimed at newer players or players who aren't in upper echelons of IM or Invite. So we'll get started here without any further ado. This will be our first Uber from KBK of the Tryhards on Snakewater. The reason that this Uber is popped is Tag bombed in and died, and now they are trying to push with their player advantage. So KBK pops this Uber right away. He leads Dummy in Ubered and then flashes Try and flashes back several times. His Uber is completely gone and he dies. So what happened? Well, KBK popped Uber on Dummy initially to prevent him from taking damage because of how deeply he went in. Try was not buffed, so he flashes Try for the first time to get him up to 300. Try does a rocket jump into the other team to pop their Uber. Try gets too far ahead of KBK in doing this jump, and Dummy continues to move forward, so KBK flashes several more times in this. Flashing Uber causes your Uber charge to fade much more quickly. It's such that every flash while the other player is blinking decreases the duration of the Uber by a half of a second. Thus, KBK's Uber that would normally last 8 seconds lasts just a little bit over 5. They don't manage to get the pop out in those 5 seconds until very near the end of the 5 seconds. Shade's Uber is basically on one person during that time, and that means that he's got essentially 8 seconds of Uber just to do with as they please, and also completely overwhelm Dummy, Try, and KBK. In that situation, the only real thing that KBK could have done was use Dummy solely to try and get the Uber out, or upon the first flashing of Try and stay with Try and have Dummy play a little bit more passively. They became so concerned about the pop that they lost track of their Uber and then ended up completely wasting it and ended up losing second as a result. In this situation, KBK, in the same match that we just saw, is preparing to push off of his own last with Uber advantage. For all intents and purposes, they also have picks for this because many of the players that you see alive for the blue team, HRG, have literally just spawned. For a medic, there's really no more dangerous situation in the entire game. Here we see KBK approaching. Pipes are coming, he dodges, but he takes one, so he decides to pop just as the soldier gets behind him. The Uber comes through, they get 2 picks. He remembers that Banny's stickies are there. They're still there, he doesn't want to walk by it. They det like right as he walks by. He takes the safer route under, nice and protected there, heals his team, and they get the point. So what happened? KBK knew that he was in an incredibly dangerous situation. He pops just as a soldier flies by his head, so his good sense there saves his life and his Uber. He then pops Uber on his most forward possible player, who then bullies out HRG, as well as the rest of his team killing everyone that came to kill KBK. That ends in the Tryhards getting the point. Obviously, they would have liked to not pop Uber there, but it allows the Tryhards to hold the point for quite some time and also have a pick advantage that they can use to push mid if they're quick about it. KBK's good sense gets his team mid. Our third Uber will be from Nosferatu on the Madmen. They will be pushing with a compositional advantage, Uber v Uber. You don't hear that term very often. It means that the other team is running a sniper. So the Madmen assume that the flank is going to be weaker than normal because the sniper is trying to kill Nos, and he won't have a good angle on this Uber coming in, so they're essentially fighting 5v6. So here we see the Madmen pushing through the flank. They get in a little bit of a ways. Nos pops because he assumes Blank is in danger. There are a lot of people there. And then the Uber from Mix-Up wraps around behind them. Nos escapes. He has plenty of Uber left. Unfortunately, Blank dies. So what happened? Nos forces his Uber onto Blank because Blank drops to 200 health. It's a good decision to pop on your soldier in that situation because you don't want him really dropping under because he'll be useless for the after Uber fight. Unfortunately, Mix-Up apparently was going to let him in after that point, so it's a little bit unlucky on Nos' part there to have popped, because it's unlikely that Blank would have received additional pressure. Blank then jumps in to try and get their Uber out, and Mix-Up's Uber wraps around behind Nos. Because Nos hasn't flashed anyone during this entire time until he flashes RR, due to Blank jumping away from him to pop the Uber, Nos still has plenty of Uber to get out, and they only lose Blank. Mix-Up's counter-aggression is cancelled out because Blank distracted so much of their team with killing him because of his deep jump. So Nos and his crew have time to set back up in defensive positions and keep Mix-Up from just rolling to second or pushing in and getting additional kills due to the death of Blank. In our fourth Uber, we'll again see Nosferatu Man, but this time holding last with Uber. Mix-Up is already in. Nos just needs to kite away and try and keep RR alive, since the Demo Man is the most important. He's looking for other people to keep alive, but because of how late Nos' Uber came out and all of that, Mix-Up just has to back out. This video demonstrates very clearly a principle that's really good to learn, especially for newer medics. When an Uber comes in, backing up straight back is generally someone's first response, but that actually doesn't cause as much distance to come between their Uber and you as running away diagonally. So, as you're moving away, Nos backs up to where he has the most space to back up, then finally pops his Uber. Mix-Up's Uber is already about halfway done, a little over halfway, I'd say maybe 2/3 done by the time Nos finally pops, and nobody on the Madmen has died because they've all done the same tactic. Thus, the Madmen hold last easily, and Mix-Up has to vacate the premises. In the fifth Uber, we'll be going back to KBK, who will be pushing last with a significant advantage, that is players and in Uber. Here we see KBK going in for the Uber on the approach run. He takes a little bit of damage, so he flashes around. Now, the flashing here isn't bad because there's no Uber to respond, and he's just trying to keep his team as healthy as possible. Again, just trying to heal whoever is hurt. He pressures the point a little bit because there are no scouts available to do so. He knows that scout's distracted with him. He gets a pick on the demo and a pick on the scout and caps the point. While most folks would simply be cheering about the crossbow kills that KBK gets at the end of this, what it shows is how a medic should manage pushing in with full advantage. There's no reason not to flash the entire world and make sure that everybody is kept healthy and happy. Then, KBK notices that he draws a lot of attention to himself after he baits the point. He draws some players towards him, which allows Dummy and his other teammates to deal damage and also get a chance to reload. KBK then re-enters, knowing that his team is still in there fighting and that they need help. He doesn't see anyone right away, so he breaks out his weapons, which again, even if he had not gotten the 2 kills, would have been a helpful distraction for the likes of Dummy and the scout that's just now coming in, because KBK was more or less perfectly healthy. He didn't have full health, but he had enough that he could have taken at least 2 shots from the enemy, and they would have been focused on him since he was nearest to the point. That's what allowed him to be in the position he was, and even if he hadn't got the kills, his team was still pretty much likely to cap last. Our sixth Uber will be from HRG Shade, who will be Ubering in against the Madmen, Uber v Uber with a pick advantage. So Shade pops his Uber, he goes in here, he turns around and flashes Banny in. This isn't going to work now because his Uber isn't long enough and Banny gets knocked away. Shade does escape, he manages to even keep his sniper alive. So things reset more or less, HRG can't push. I show this clip for 2 reasons. One, this is actually a mistake by HRG. They either presumed that Nos would not yet have his Uber, or Banny got way too aggressive in the early phases of that Uber, because you're just not going to be able to beat a team Uber v Uber if you're Ubering in two separate players. Your Uber is already knocked down by half a second, as we learned earlier in the video, and it's only going to get worse because it's Banny. Like, what? There's nothing in the world that's going to stop a team from not making you flash him additional times. Secondly, when you Uber in, always have a plan to fall back to somebody. Usually it's the demo, or a heavy, or at least a scout. Or your pocket if you're trying to be really weird about it. It really doesn't matter. You need to have somebody to back up to. In this case, Shade only really had a sniper to back up to, and Sniper is not really going to be able to make his way in with the heals that Shade gives him at the end. So, at the end of this is a good demonstration of what to do if you think you have advantage, you Uber in your 2 to 3 players, and then all of a sudden they've got Uber. It shows you to bail out immediately, and also how the combat classes can get out. They don't necessarily have to leave through the same door that the medic does. Our 7th Uber won't even be an Uber, it'll be a crits. Here we go with Shade popping crits onto Lansky, and Lansky getting 3 solid kills, and basically finishing off the Madmen, winning the round. So what happened? Well, Shade died earlier, as did Nosferatu. Shade took a gamble and decided to go crits, which would give him an advantage because crits builds about 30% faster than Uber. Shade then uses that crits on last against a Madmen that don't have any response to it. Banny is dead, but this still shows the viability of a soldier crits in the event that something is close. Yes, it's generally always better to crits your demo man, but that's because of the range involved. If a lot of things are very close to you and you're running crits, best to use the soldier. He shoots the ground much more effectively than the demo man does. It also shows you how to utilize the crits in a different way, because you can't really hold a crits. You basically have to use it as soon as you get it. The 8th Uber will be from Smacka, and it will be Uber versus Uber with a pick advantage. We see Smacka being led in here by Platt. He takes a little bit of damage. He sees a sticky on the ground. He has to pop. The Uber is exchanged right here, and they just sort of dance around trying to gain position. The positioning for Smacka is better, and that scout just comes in out of nowhere essentially and chases out the combo. So even though their Uber was a bit shorter there, everything turned out okay. This clip shows the importance of timing. That's what happened here. The Uber exchange was Uber v Uber, and really KBK had the better Uber exchange here going for him. However, a scout comes in from Riverside, and the soldier that's with KBK doesn't have the ammo to deal with that, so they have to leave the area. And it ends up with Mix-Up just spilling all over them because they have the player advantage, and also now the combo for the tryhards is on the run. As medic, it's crucially important that if you know that Ubers are more or less the same, or that yours is better, that as your Uber ends, you start screaming for your team to come in and help, or to go do whatever it is they intend to do. Most of the times when teams have decent Uber exchanges, but then end up losing, it's because the rest of the team that wasn't involved in the Uber didn't know what was going on. So as med, or pocket, it's primarily your responsibility to A, let your team know how your Uber's been going, and B, as your Uber reaches about 15% or so, yell at the team to get in. Also, it's helpful that at 15%, flashing your Uber has essentially no punishment because you're already in that half-second margin, and the game doesn't just make your Uber poof because of there only being a half-second left. Our 9th Uber will be brought to us from a bit ago in the past, from Season 11. You'll notice the old version of Process being played, and the medic we'll be watching will be Brad Pierre Ross. So see, his suit gets damaged, so the other team pushes in. Brad goes to ground. He pops Uber to save the scout there, and then his pocket goes forward and the enemy's pocket goes forward. He sees that his flank has actually come through as well, which are all these people spilling through. So the only remainder of red is behind them and is promptly taken out. So what happened? Well, the other team pushed in because they did a great deal of damage to Soup, who was the demo at the time, and they thought that that would allow them to push in with relative ease since the demo was more or less out of commission. Brad's usage of the Uber and what his team did stopped Soup's being damaged from mattering. What happened there was Brad saw that he had a scout in choke that was very hurt, so he popped Uber on him to save his life. That scout does the smart thing and knows that he's not going to be able to hold the Uber that whole time because there are other people that are going to be needing it. If that scout had stayed, Pure would have had to flash more, which would have cut his Uber down and played into the hands of his opponents. Instead, that scout basically says, "Thanks for the heals," and then leaves. At which point Brad can then hold his Uber on the soldier, which is what he wants to do. That soldier then does what we saw in the soldier episode of driving behind when there's no one around. Pure turns around to look at his team behind. No, there's no one back there, but he does need to make sure that they stay alive. Then he sees that his team is wrapped through choke and that everything's okay. So, in essence, the lesson we can learn here is that although generally it's a bad idea to flash, it's always better to make sure that someone does not die. And our 10th and final Uber will be brought to us by Harblue, and it will be an example of a European-style Uber, which is Uber v Uber with no pick advantage. So Harblue goes in here to Uber, and they do. And then they realize their Uber's a bit better. TLR juggles around a bit, and then they bail out. Then the tail end of Red Team's Uber comes in on them. Harb continues healing whoever he can, and the picks fall. So what happened? TLR and Harblue Ubered in. They danced around a bit. They got a very good early force. Harblue held it until the absolute last moment, basically. They would have been safe for everybody. And then they pull back. The enemy thinks they have a much better Uber than they do, and they end up pushing out into the entirety of Mix-Up and losing 3 players. And that's how the European Uber is meant to work. You Uber in with your own Uber, of course, and then get their Uber out of them, and then hope either A, that you make their Uber awful and you can stay where you are and win, B, that you pop their Uber and get out and then you start working your way back in, or 3, they chase you and run into basically 5 people, they die, you push right back in because you've got a pick advantage. This is an example of the third case. It's also a pretty aggressive play because you've got to pop it and you've got to bail at just the right time. And by my count, that's 10 Ubers. So I hope you found this to be helpful and enjoyable. The 3rd episode will be coming someday in the future, and it will be focused on the demo man in Ubers.